While an increased risk for late-life neurodegenerative disease and dementia has consistently been observed in professional athletes with very high exposure to repetitive head impacts, such as former professional boxers and US football players, much less is known about neurologic outcomes in sports with lower head trauma exposure. A 2017 summit on head injury in soccer concluded that the frequency of headers increases from the youth level to the professional level. Both overall header exposure and the force of impact generated by headers were deemed relatively low but with considerable individual variability. Linear forces generated by heading the ball can range from as low as 5G to as high as 60G. Studies have inconsistently detected acute and chronic sequelae of soccer headers, with some studies reporting associations between more frequent headers, worse cognitive test performance, and compromised white matter integrity on magnetic resonance imaging. Questions about links between soccer-associated head trauma and late-life neurologic changes first stemmed from reports of former players with high profiles developing dementia. Two former soccer stars from England, Jeff Astle and Danny Blanchflower, both developed young-onset Alzheimer-like dementia syndromes, with autopsies later confirming neurodegenerative disease causative mechanisms. Subsequent reports documented the presence of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a neurodegenerative disease associated with repeated head impacts, in a former captain of the Brazilian national team and other players with high profiles. Researchers speculated these brain changes may be because of head impacts sustained throughout decades of play, but definitive evidence was lacking. Dementia Risk Study provided the first large-scale epidemiologic evidence that professional soccer players were at higher risk for dementia. The study identified former professional soccer players using the record of pre-war and post-war Scottish League players and matched them to community-based controls using the Community Health Index and Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, an indicator of socioeconomic status. Compared with control participants, Scottish male professional soccer players were found to have a risk of death with neurodegenerative disease approximately 3.5 times higher and were also more likely to have received drug treatment for dementia during life. Russell and colleagues expand on these findings by demonstrating that dementia risk varies by player position and duration of professional playing career. Hazard ratios for neurodegenerative disease were highest among players in the outfield and especially defenders, a position associated with a higher frequency of headers. Conversely, risk in former professional goalkeepers, who rarely head the ball, did not differ significantly from control participants. Efforts to mitigate head impacts in soccer have prioritized youth soccer players. The US Soccer Fédération recently banned headers in practices and games for players younger than 10 years. Significant restrictions were imposed on header frequency in practice, but not games, for those aged 11 and 12 years. National and international soccer governing bodies also recently announced a pilot program for concussion substitutions that would allow teams to replace up to 2 players with a suspected concussion beyond standard substitution limits. Overall, the body of evidence linking professional soccer participation with later life dementia is rapidly growing, revealing an ugly side to the beautiful game. These data represent an unequivocal call for soccer's governing bodies to take action to minimize risks for long-term negative health outcomes, implementing rule changes that optimize head trauma prevention while preserving soccer's rich integrity and international popularity.